Hello, everyone. My name is Carole Lyles Shaw, and I'd like to share with you the virtual classes and lectures that I offer for individuals and for guilds and groups. So, first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a modern quilter and an art quilter. I teach workshops for groups and individuals. I am a lecturer. And also, I am an author with 2 books about modern quilting, and I'm a blogger. Finally, I'm a co founder of the Sarasota, Florida Modern Quilt Guild. Let me start by describing the lectures that I give guilds over Zoom. The first lecture is called What is a Modern Quilt? The Myths and the Magic. I do several things in this lecture. One of them is before I talk about what a modern quilt is, I first share some of the myths that still exist out there about what a modern quilt must be. I do go over the modern quilt design principles, and I also talk about some of the emerging trends that I see in the quilt world. I have a full virtual trunk show where I share lots of examples of my quilts where I demonstrate the modern quilt design principles in action. And of course, there's always time for Q&A. The next lecture that's also very popular is my adventures in improv, where I talk about, first of all, how I define improvisational piecing and quilting, improvisational quilt making. I share with you some of the ways that I approach designing an improv quilt. I share some of the traditional to modern quilts that I've made using improvisation. And I also talk about the quilting stitch and my approach, what I call eccentric improv quilting. In this lecture, I share examples of Afro-modern, maximalism, and my newest series of geometric abstraction quilts. And once again, there's time for Q&A. The art of the quilt is another lecture that many guilds have found quite interesting. I share my definition of an art quilt. I talk about the inspiration sources that have inspired the different series of art quilts that I've made over the years. I talk about my design processes and some of the tools and techniques and materials that I use when I'm making my art quilts, including how I source vintage fabrics and linens and use them in my design process. I talk about working in a series, both abstract art quilts and the different series of portrait quilts that I've made over the years. Again, time for Q&A. I also offer what I call my Madly Modern webinars. This is a series of webinars that I offer virtually over Zoom. Some of those webinars will be free and open to anyone to attend, and some of the webinars require paid registration. And you can find information, of course, about my webinars and my lectures on my website, which is carolelylesshaw.com. I also have a membership program called the Modern Quilt Academy. The Modern Quilt Academy is an online and on-demand learning community. The MQA is a membership program for individual quilters of different styles and interests. It isn't just for modern quilters or people who are only interested in making modern quilts. Instead, in the Academy, we embrace a wide range of styles, techniques, and interests. from modern to modern traditional, Afro-modern, the geometric abstraction quilts that I mentioned earlier. I also teach some techniques around that. Art quilting will also be included, and sustainable quilting. And lastly, I've left a category that's open called undefined and evolving, because there are always new things happening in the quilt world, and we will want to incorporate some learning and techniques and tools about what's happening today, tomorrow, and even beyond. The Modern Quilt Academy is hosted on a private online site. Membership is flexible, and it includes a wide range of on-demand workshops. And every one of those workshops is complete with step-by-step tutorials, including tutorials on fabric selection, piecing, quilting, and even more. Each workshop includes a PDF workbook that's full color that includes, of course, fabric requirements and patterns for block making and layouts. The Modern Quilt Academy will also include live sessions over Zoom. Some of those are informal tutorials or Q&A sessions for members, and we'll also do show and share. It's also a time when members can come together live and get input and ideas from each other. There will also be an online private community. You don't have to go to Facebook or anything like that. The community discussions are hosted on the Quilt Academy site. Now, some of the workshops, and there are tons of them, are listed here on the screen. Lots of workshops on improvisational curves, such as the Parisian curves and mid-century modern, and the most recent curve workshop called Doorways. Fractured Disappearing Nine Patch is included, and even the Sustainability and the Stash Jazz workshop is included in the Academy. Some of the newer workshops will include half rectangle triangle joy using the HRT, with rulers and without, pinwheel improv. Now, pinwheel improv is a traditional to modern workshop where we'll take the traditional pinwheel block and really do some amazing things with it in an improvisational way. There's an improv squares workshop, which is a great starting point because it's square blocks, and we'll use a variety of either African prints or bold modern prints, your choice, and we'll make improvisational squares. Sarasota Sunset is also a workshop that focuses on making improv blocks in columns. So there's a little hint of traditionalism here, but we'll also have a layout that I'll show you how to make that can be really improv. Here are some of the other workshops that will be available in the Modern Quilt Academy. Celebration Quilts is about how to use family photographs and documents, as well as vintage linens and other fabrics, to preserve your family history. Another workshop will be text on fabric, and I'll give you some techniques and even some templates for creating words and phrases to put on your quilts. You could be putting them on a baby quilt with the child's name. It might be a quilt that has more of a message that you want to share with the world. We'll play with an very traditional block, of course, the log cabin, and look at some ways that we can make that more improvisational, either in the way we make the blocks and or the layouts of those blocks. We've all done quilts called the Jelly Roll Race using those 2.5-inch strip sets. And sometimes we get sets that are complete, in a roll, in a bundle. And I'll share some ways that you can use some of your stash to also add more options as you're making those Jelly Roll Race quilts. And lastly, there will be classes on making and displaying fabric collages, and this is more of an art quilt class, using the fabrics that we love. Could be incorporating some of those photographs I mentioned earlier, but lots of options, and then how to display them using off-the-shelf framing materials. The Modern Quilt Academy will have an area that I call foundations, and these will be short tutorials. These are pre-recorded videos on techniques, tools, design principles, color, using color tools, how to build a color palette, and even more. There will be a webinar library that is a library of the pre-recorded webinars and any new live webinars, particularly the ones that are only going to be offered for members of the Academy. So even if you can't attend live, when I record that webinar, you can watch it in the library. And of course, I mentioned that there will be a community, and that's a very important aspect of the Modern Quilt Academy. So we want everyone to be active there. So here's some of the things, the wonderful things that students say about my virtual classes. And generally, people are really, really pleased with a couple of things. One is that my workshops are very informative and they're very detailed. I really try to share the step-by-step processes, techniques, how I use tools, how I do my planning, and how I do my decision making as I'm making each project. And of course, if you have follow-up questions to the pre-recorded class, you can always ask those questions in the community. I have fun when I'm filming my classes. I try not to be too serious. And I think some of that also comes across as people are watching the videos and interacting with me in our live sessions. So you can scan this QR code. Registration is open, or you can find a link to the Academy on my website. If you look at the top bar of the website, you'll see a tab that says Modern Quilt Academy, and it will take you directly to the website for the Academy, where you can learn more about what's happening and where you can register. There's one other place that you can access my classes online and on demand, and that is on Creative Spark, which is a learning platform hosted by CT Publishing. And CT, of course, is that wonderful company that has those wonderful books about all aspects of quilting and crafting in general. On the CT Publishing website, you can purchase Fractured Disappearing 9-patch as an on-demand class, and you can also purchase the webinar recording on African prints and how to use them in contemporary quilts and craft projects. I had the pleasure of doing that webinar with Lisa Shepherd Stewart, who owns Cultured Expressions, a wonderful online shop where you can purchase African prints. And by the way, in addition to the webinar recording, you'll also have access to 2 crafting projects, one that Lisa provides and a project that I also provide. So thank you so much for watching, and please visit my website, sign up for my newsletter. I'm always announcing new things, new events, new classes in my newsletter. And you can also access all the other information, my blog, and everything else about Carole Lyles Shaw on this site. Thank you again, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.